Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us again on what is a dreary afternoon today for our webinar. But we're hoping that because we've got such an interesting session, it might brighten up the afternoon for you. We've got a lot to get through today because we've got our largest panel yet. So I'm going to first of all go through the housekeeping, just to remind everybody that we use Livestorm as a platform for these webinars. And to get the best experience, it is best if you can use it via Google Chrome. If anybody is having any audio or visual issues, if you press the refresh button, that should hopefully alleviate any of the problems that you have. As per usual, for those that are familiar with the format of these webinars, we have the chat function on the right-hand side of the screen, and we would be really happy if you could introduce yourself so we know who's participating today. And also, it's a great way for you to still network, although we can't do it in person. This is the next best thing, I guess. Also, we're hoping that you will have questions for the panel, and we would encourage you to use the questions tab. And we will pick those questions up as we go through the session and hopefully get some answers for you and some help and assistance there. And also just to remind you that the sessions are all recorded. So if you've got colleagues that would have liked to have watched the session today and are not able to, at least they can access it on our YouTube channel after the event. And that will be supported as well by some materials that will be shared with you all. So as you know, the session today is around health and well-being, and very, very timely given what's been happening over the past 24 hours. And I think we can all agree that even in kind of normal periods of time, health and well-being of employees is of paramount importance to good employers. I think good employers do recognise that there is a link between good physical and mental health and also productivity and happiness. So that's really, really important. And this is one of the characteristics that's probably the one that's evolving and you're having to adapt to all of the time. Because not only is it, kind of very significant at the moment with what's happening in the world, but there's also a very, very individual element to it as well, because everybody is responding differently to the changing times. We've learned over the past 6 months that COVID is having a huge impact on all of our lives, not just our working lives, but our kind of social lives as well. And I think the lockdowns and the restrictions are all having an impact on people's stress. It's changing our eating habits, it's changing drinking habits. We're not getting out to do physical activity in the way that we were doing before. It's preventing us from socialising, from seeing our loved ones. And I think there's, again, with the news that we've recently had, that uncertainty is causing stress, and the economic turbulence as well is giving you as employers a lot of challenges to deal with, kind of in the past and also going forward as well. Coupled with that, obviously, it's very difficult in this environment to kind of manage some of those health and well-beings when we're having to do it from a distance. It's not always easy to pick up on body language or kind of emotional triggers when you're looking at somebody through a laptop. So, we're very mindful of that. And we're hoping that by having the wonderful panel that we have today with a wealth of expertise with us, and we're very, very fortunate to have a bigger panel than normal, but very timely that we've got all these great people with us today. So I'm just going to do some introductions. So we have John Brady, who's Senior Officer at GreaterSport, and some of you will recognise John from our previous webinars that we've done and from our supporters networks in the days when we could see each other in person. We've got Dr. Ruth Watson, and Ruth is the Deputy Clinical Lead for Adults at the Resilience Hub. So really useful at this point in time to talk about mental health. We've got Haleh, and I'm going to, in terms of pronouncing Haleh's surname, I'm going to use the pronunciation that her students give her, which is Moravej, because Haleh is the founder of MetMUnch and is a senior lecturer at Manchester Metropolitan University. So it's very fitting that her students call her Haleh Moravej. We were talking about that the other day. We've also got Steve Fletcher, who's the CEO of Vernon Building Society, to give us an employer's perspective. And also Kelly Gilmour-Grassam, who is the director at making you content. So quite a vast range of experiences there, and we'll hopefully pick up the links between mental health, physical health, and nutrition as well. So to start off with, because I'm just very conscious of time today, I'm going to start off the first question with John. And just basically, if you remember, John, we had a great supporters network session with you in December of last year, when we were able to congregate together in person. And at that event, we talked about activity in the workplace, and you talked about your toolkit as well. So given what's been happening over the past 6 months, how has that changed in light of COVID, and what approaches are you now taking?
It's kind of changed dramatically, really, because obviously everything that we were focusing on was going to be office-based and workplace-based. So there was a quick turnaround as far as, working from home and what did that entail, basically. And, those of you who were there for the supporter event, we talked about the Live Well Day and how we could do that during our working day in the office. Now it's about how we can do that at home and ensure that we're getting out and about, especially, as the weather's just about to change as well now. And so the focus now is massively on working from home and making sure that people, we were talking to, I think it was John Lewis the other day, and they were talking about how they were using that commuting time to encourage activity. So rather than you being sat in a car for an hour and a half, how could you use that time, maybe half an hour of it, to go for a walk in the morning or go for a walk in the evening, but basically encourage a little bit more activity into the day. And then obviously going back to the Live Well Day, we've had to redesign that to ensure that people are getting breaks during the day, and they're not just, because it's so easy just to get up in the morning, go straight to your desk and work the whole day through, to make sure that you're still getting breaks during your day. But yeah, so there's a huge emphasis now on working from home. Yeah,
and I completely see what you mean about that kind of the time that we used to have before in between meetings, for example, where you had that thinking space, or you could do a bit of physical activity. Now it just kind of bumps up against meeting after meeting, doesn't it? That's one of the kind of dangers of working from home. So yeah, it's going to be testing times, isn't it? Yeah. So absolutely, so I'll come to you then. Yeah. So if I come to you then, Ruth, so there's obviously the link between physical health and mental health. So can you say a little bit about the Resilience Hub and kind of the work that you do there, and also from the work that you've been doing, kind of the things that you've learned, and is there any advice that you could give to our employers?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we were set up back in 2017 following the Manchester Arena attack as a kind of coordinated effort between the main NHS trusts across Manchester. And we learned quite a lot from that initial part of our work, in that we did get a lot of contact from people who were distressed, and we were able to support them. But we also noticed that there were sometimes delays in people who were reaching out for support. So it was often the professionals and the people who care for others who were more delayed in their seeking of support. So we needed to take a more persistent and persistent and long-term approach to try and engage with them. Yeah. So I guess in our more recent work, we've now been commissioned to offer wellbeing support and screening to all health and social care staff affected by COVID across Greater Manchester. And we're still trying to spread the word really about our offer and make sure people understand we're there, and that we're ready to listen and offer the support we can to them. And that offer also extends to family members of those COVID workers as well. But the same pattern's happening, in a sense that we know it's the people who normally work looking after other people who are reluctant to seek support themselves, might not be thinking about their own needs until much later down the line. So I guess that's the first thing I'd say to everyone listening, really, is that it might be the people who you work with who don't say that they need anything, or who are reluctant to ask for it, who do need it, because they're frequently prioritising the needs of other people before their own. So I mean, do you want me to talk a bit later about that, Carol, about the questions to ask, or shall I talk about that now?
No, you can talk about it now. That'd be great.
Okay, great. So I think what we'd be suggesting that employers look for, I mean, given that we're all living in a really unusual situation where it's presenting a huge threat to all of us, we need to see change in that context. But what I'd be saying is that the employees that you know well, look for change, might be a change in their mood, in their body language. Often people might appear that they're under high levels of threat all the time, so that might affect their sleep, their appetite, their ability to concentrate. But if you also work and live in a constant state of threat for a long period, you're then going to experience a level of burnout and more of an emotional flatness. So it might be that the people you're working with don't necessarily respond emotionally in the same way they would normally do. So they might not be as able to get enjoyment from things they'd normally enjoy, and might not appear to respond and interact with the people around them in the same way. And over time, I mean, I think we're all facing questions, aren't we, about the future and when we can get back to doing what we'd normally do. But another sign to look for might be that people you're working with might seem a bit more hopeless and are making fewer plans, or not able to take the same enjoyment from those social contacts they can do in those activities they previously have enjoyed. So I'd really encourage having those conversations, but having them repeatedly. So not being afraid to keep asking, how you're doing, are you doing okay? Making sure there's enough space in your conversations with them to have that discussion in a way that doesn't feel pressured or rushed, and that your staff member doesn't feel it's just about performance or their absences. It's also about that you're ready to listen and understand what's going on for them, because we've all been facing some levels of threat that are similar, but we all bring to this situation a very different background of our own mental health, our own previous losses, and our own sources of stress at home. So you might have very different staff members who come with very different sources of anxiety and worry from their home lives.
Yeah, I think that's really important about, like we said, about the individual aspect of it as well, and not just having a blanket approach to everything. Because, like you've said, individuals deal differently with different circumstances and challenges, and I think it is harder as well as kind of managers to pick up on some of those changes because of the fact that we're having to do much of it via technology nowadays, where you can't pick up the body language. So by having those kind of longer discussions, as you've suggested, you should hopefully start to be able to pick up on some of those differences, shouldn't you? Yeah, that's really helpful. That's brilliant. So we'll go to Haleh now. So kind of I'll link here to kind of nutrition as well. And we know that when you eat well, it makes you feel better both physically and mentally. But we do know as well that over the past 6 months, a lot of the eating habits and drinking habits have changed for so many people. And basically, they're probably not improved for the better. So have you got any tips or advice for our employees in terms of how they can support their employees, Haleh, in terms of, eating better and looking after themselves?
Yeah, thank you very much for including me in this panel, because really important to have nutrition as part of this. We are what we eat. And I think it's really important employers really take care of this issue as well, on top of everything else. So, kind of for me, again, one size is not going to fit all. Each individual is very different. They have different nutritional kind of intakes and activity levels and likes and dislikes. And also when we consider the cultural element, people eat differently. So I think we have to kind of allow people to become, more empowered when it comes, to nutrition. So, for example, in our university, just before we went to lockdown, they created a meat-free cafe that was all about, kind of providing really delicious local artisan food that was sold on campus. It was driven by students, and we saw the sort of the profits go up by about 274% just before we closed down for lockdown. But for me, it's kind of like just really small bite-sized information about nutrition that's really, really important. I mean, I'm the nutritional advisor for Anxiety UK, so we've done a little booklet which I'm very happy to send to you, so you can actually pass on to everybody who needs it. And it is actually about the effect of food and food on mood and performance and concentration and memory. We know, for example, when you're dehydrated, your memory and your concentration gets affected. So if you're drinking lots of coffee, that can actually make people stressed and really, kind of angry and anxious. So, having a water bottle, which I've explained when I met with you, I have a water bottle on my desk, and throughout the day, it reminds me of work, and I still kind of like carry on having my water intake on a daily basis. I actually put like a fruit bowl in the middle of the table. So instead of kind of like going for the usual biscuits and sweet and sugary things, you're more likely to go for the fruit and veg. So, when lockdown happened, we had two different kinds of reactions. Some people started becoming really healthy, and I'm sure some people saw like people exercising, people going for more fresh fruits and vegetables, realizing that immune system really needed to be, protected and supported. And at the other side, we had people who kind of like just thought, oh, I'm going to be at home, I'm stressed. And again, that reaction, fight, fright, and they went, lots of baking, lots of cooking, lots of complex carbohydrates. But again, kind of like during times of stress, people go for different kinds of food. And we know that when people get stressed, they go for more sugary, they go for that fast release energy foods. And, and again, a little bit of that is not a problem. We are not diet police here. We want to encourage people to have a balanced diet. So I think education is the key for me. Education, empowerment, kind of opportunities for people to ask questions, even, things like fermented food. We know that, a lot of reaction between the brain and the gut are so important. So could we encourage people to make their own kimchi, their own, kind of sauerkraut, have 80 grams a day? That would really help, kind of mental health, as well as, kind of like, doing it yourself. When you do it yourself, you feel a lot more empowered. There's so much to do with nutrition. And I think it goes beyond guidelines. We know that sometimes guidelines could be really boring for staff. So I think for me, it's not just about, what do we have as guidelines, but actually what kind of people can you bring in or work with, or, in a holistic fashion where nutrition becomes embedded into everything that you do, and not just as, kind of like, okay, have your 5 a day. What does it mean? How do I get it sorted? Because again, when lockdown happened, we had, a massive issue with food poverty, people relying on food banks, expense of actually buying healthy food. So again, with my students, we developed a cookbook. It's called Cook and Grow, and it is really, really cheap recipes, right down to like 84 pence, where people can still eat healthy, but really kind of like stick with the budget as well. So it's about, again, being aware of how nutrition and mental health and all of these things are linked, but how we can make it quite bespoke to these different individuals.
No, that's really, really helpful. And I think it's, you're right. I think breaking some of the habits and thinking and being more conscious about what we're putting into our bodies, and that link between your mental health and your physical health is all about education. And we've had quite a few comments already, Haleh, people wanting your booklet. So we will include it afterwards with the materials that we send out after this event, if that would be okay.
Sure. That would be fine.
That's brilliant. That's great. So if I move to you now, Steve, you disappeared a little while ago, but glad that you're back again. So just ask you if you could just reflect on the experiences and the challenges that you've had over the last 6 months, particularly with COVID, and what tips might you have in terms of keeping your employees healthy and well?
Yeah, I thought I'd been deleted from the panel, Carol, by Haleh, because basically I'm not following any of the information she had. It sounded like she'd been following me around working at home with all the sugary stuff next to It's certainly been a challenge. When we were starting off with the Greater Manchester stuff initially, it was much easier because everything was happening face-to-face, and it was very much the same for the office. So I think in line with a lot of businesses, we've had to send a lot of people to work from home. And I think that's where really this sort of thing about well-being started as well, in that we found initially quite a lot of people who were resistant to working from home for a number of reasons. And so whereas we start off from the point of view thinking this is helpful, in actual fact it's the contrary to a lot of people. And so one of the things we've we've had to be extremely flexible in our approach and very much listening to what people wanted. So I think a key throughout all this has been to make sure that the engagement with our people and the communication up, down and sideways across the business, that you're working even harder, because it is harder to do when you're at a distance. And some of the things that we value most in the business are flexibility and adaptability and resilience, and they've all been tested to the max. So we've been trying to, like most organisations, to be fair, is like trying to be flexible. We've been trying to employ a lot of virtual Teams meetings. We've made it clear the leadership team meeting has been, early on we've met every day for half an hour, whereas normally it had been a weekly meeting and then occasional. But we felt it was more important for us to be engaged, to make sure that we're engaging with our people. So we've over-engaged in almost sometimes. In fact, I'm sure some of our employees have been thinking, not a bloody meeting again, you know. But it's been conscious that we didn't want people to feel left out or to feel deserted. We actually use quite a lot of John's GreaterSport's activity list. So we appointed our head of learning to do more around pushing content to people to show what sort of things are available. So things like the Joe Wicks daily PE class. So when all the kids were off school early, in the early part, and people were looking after the kids, our employees were saying, I'm sorry I was a bit late, I've just been doing the Joe Wicks workout with the kids. So we've been trying to put things out there to keep people conscious all the time. We do an employee opinion survey every year, and that's at the end of June. And this June we put in a series of additional questions around COVID and wellbeing, and we've just been analysing the output from that. And not surprisingly, quite a lot of people on there were pushing us to get a clearer policy on home working, which we ended up almost being forced into home working by default back in March. And now what we've done is we've been working on that on the way through, but there's certain things that we have to put in place, like the environment for people. So we've been working hard on defining that for people as well. And then I think the communication side of it is extremely important. So one of the things we've taken a lot of time to do is every time there's been a government update or a local update, so it's following the Stockport coronavirus numbers all the time. We're disseminating the information that comes out nationally or BBC News, and then putting it into what does that mean for us in Vernon Building Society, what does it mean in our community, what does it mean for our people, and how should we react. And you look at like last night with the additional announcements, so we've now got face masks need to be worn in branches, as from tomorrow, they didn't yesterday. So we've quickly got onto that, what does that mean for our people. We've quickly clarified, so are there any changes in terms of the new rules that impact us as a business, that impact us in individuals in work? We also made it clear that the leadership team are very approachable, we think, but obviously, employees sometimes don't think the same. So we appointed local individuals, local people who anybody could refer to if they didn't want to refer to the LT, that they could be the spokespeople for the business. We pushed out content on things like stories and access and YouTube videos that could help with the kids or could help with people in their own well-being. We did a little bit on recipes. I don't think we got anything down to 84p, but we'll have to have a look at that one. And just generally, we've tried to be very flexible, trying to be very available to changing dynamics that's happened, because most of us have not been through this. We've just of late started looking at, we did before the COVID was down, we're just about to invest in a table tennis table for the business to try and get a bit more activity. We've already previously invested in pedometers and challenged people to get up and away. We have a decent sized lunchroom in work and an area to sit down and have a cup of coffee or read a book quietly at lunch, but we moved things back to desk because we didn't want the COVID side of it. But we were very conscious that we'd asked people to move away from desks at lunchtime to get them away from that environment, to break it, to walk around. So we're thinking, what else can we do now? Because we've pushed them back to working at a desk, the people at home. So we're just trying to gradually encourage people to move, go for a walk outside, etc. And I think that's it really. It's a range of communication's been the biggest thing I think across our business, and changing and being aware that you may think I've spent a long time now communicating for this latest update, but tomorrow it's bloody well changed again, and you're going to have to do it again and keep up to speed. So we've been more aware of what's been going on externally than ever before. The sort of things that we're looking to do at the minute is, we did introduce things like wearing smart casual, even though it doesn't look like it, because I just can never think what to wear smart casuals. It's easy to keep a jacket on. One of the things we're just about to invest in, actually, we're looking to get some resistance bands. I'm trying to look for somebody to lead the daily morning workout using resistance bands sitting at your chair. So they're things that we're investing in. John actually mentioned those to me previously. And then the other thing, I suppose, we always have stand innovation, which is people recognising people for doing great things within the business. We've tried to make sure that the slants around the rewards and awards and publication of those in the last few months has been much more towards the situation we find ourselves in.
That's fantastic. And I think you're right, communication is the biggest thing in all of this, because I think we're all grappling with the daily, kind of changes that are occurring. And that leads to some of the anxiety as well, doesn't it? Because none of us are in control of any of this, so it's kind of not knowing from one day to the next what is going to be happening. So I think even though it's kind of hard work having to keep revisiting, it's obviously definitely well worth it, and your staff are appreciating that. I love the idea of the resistance bands, because I think that's something that we could even do while we're all working from home. So I might have to have a look at those myself. And I love the fact that you're still doing the recognition, because I think that's a way as well of still making people feel like they are together as part of a team, and making people still feel valued for what they're doing, even though they may be at a distance or not working in the same way that they have done previously. They're still doing a good job at the end of the day, aren't they? And that's important for people in terms of their kind of, I guess, mental health and well-being as well. So that's really, really inspirational. So thank you for that. So I'm going to ask the same question to Kelly now as well, who comes from a smaller organisation than Steve. But again, Kelly, from your perspective, what have been the key challenges for you over the past 6 months, and how have you tackled them? And what are you doing and developing to keep your staff motivated as we go kind of towards the next 6 months?
Yeah, well, I saw a lot of synergies, to be honest, with what Steve was doing in terms of the things we've been focusing on and some of the things we've tried and changed. Obviously, when we all sort of switched to remote working back in March, we started doing daily catch-ups, which in the beginning, I think, especially like when it was all very new to us all, that was received really well. We all took it in turns to do an activity every day, like whether it was a quiz or whatever it might be. But kind of going back to what Ruth was saying earlier, like, everybody responds differently to communication, and what we found was some people really liked that, and other people found that it got quite tiring, like having that every single day when they maybe in a morning that their energy levels might not be at the peak. So we kind of revised it when we realized that we were going to be working home for sort of the foreseeable. We sort of scaled it down to doing catch-ups every other day. So now we have catch-up calls on a Monday, Wednesday and Friday, and we have a rota so that different people get an opportunity to organise some things. So that kind of helps with the culture element. And then sort of around that to kind of make sure that we're communicating and also listening on different levels. We've always had monthly one-to-ones with team members, but I didn't want that to feel like really formal, when actually the key thing I was worried about was making sure that people are okay. So I've also been making sure that I'm doing sort of how are you doing calls with people throughout the month as well. In fact, picking up on something, whether they've had a day off and ringing them to see how the day off was, or if they've got something coming up, like really just making sure I'm finding reasons to check in with people. Because what I found is people open up a lot more in that than they would in, like, say, the one-to-one that's a bit more formal, or in the team call. We've also set up a couple of channels within our Slack. We use Slack as a business, which is basically like WhatsApp for business. I'm sure you've got something similar for Teams. So we've got a kudos channel, which is just about sort of celebrating little successes, and a You OK channel, which is, things like reacting to the latest updates and sort of sharing things. And we do now have a monthly, what we call take-ins, where we go through here's what's happening, here's the updates we've been doing. So we basically created a range of different ways of communicating and listening so that we can respond to different people's ways of doing that. One thing that we've kind of realized is obviously we're in this for the long term now. So we'd spent 10 grand on an office that we'd not stepped foot in over the past 6 months. And, we'd, for a time, some of the team had taken a pay cut, other people's pay rises were put on hold. So we decided to get rid of the office, which has allowed us to kind of give the people that were due a pay rise and get everyone back onto full pay. Obviously, that's really helped with the motivation. And now we're looking at things that we've maybe delayed doing during lockdown previously, which is bringing back education slots, making sure we have a monthly education thing, adding in new awards, and really just looking at how we can be more flexible. So letting people set their own hours more, because we've really built trust with the team over this period, and also getting people's input on what they want. So we previously decided that we'd go back to the office in September, when lockdown started. That was kind of what we pinned it as. And it was actually, I was stressing about it and thinking, what do people want to do? And I just decided, why don't I just ask everyone rather than me just making the decision and it being on my head? And just people's input on that. And they were really responsive and really helpful. And so recently we were going to do a social a couple of weeks ago. And I thought, you know what, rather than me stressing about that and making sure if it's COVID secure, why don't I just ask everyone and play to the least comfortable person in the room? So one thing I would definitely say, to any employers, especially small businesses, where for me it is just me, myself and I making these quite big decisions at times, is just ask the team that even if you don't necessarily go with their opinion, I think they feel listened to and valued by having that input, and sometimes raising really good points. When I said about phased return to the office, people said, what about desktops? What about this, that and the other? Things that I hadn't even considered. So yeah, there's a lot of great ideas that have been thrown around today, but I think definitely getting that input from your team as well is really important.
Yeah, I think that is really important. And I think as well for people like yourself and like Steve, where, you are traditionally the decision makers within your organisations, this is all new territory, and it could probably feel like quite a lonely role at the time when you're trying to make all of those big decisions and think about everybody else and how they might be feeling. So, I think it's great that you are asking the team and getting them involved as well, and kind of almost doing things by consensus. I think that's really helpful. And again, it's communication, isn't it? And adapting that communication to kind of how individuals prefer to be spoken to. So I've got a couple of questions here. I've got a question for you, Ruth. Okay, so how can you help employees from descending on a downward spiral where there is so much uncertainty?
I think that's a really, really good question. I guess what I'd say is, my first thought is that as their managers and team leaders, you can contain a lot of their anxiety. You can't take it away, but by offering that opportunity to listen to how they feel and what they're anxious about, and support them with communication that is appropriate, timely, and not too overwhelming, can also do a lot to absorb that anxiety and that uncertainty. Because if they know that you are there and you're filtering through and telling them what they need to know, and you're there consistently, that can be really reassuring and really comforting to employees. I think the second part of that is being honest with them and sharing some of their worries and concerns about the future, because none of us know what it's going to look like. But I guess often, I think, building on what Kelly just said about taking a lead from the team as well, sometimes the team can be really good at sharing ideas and suggestions for how to find the positive in the current time. So we don't want you to be, as team leaders, to be the experts and saying, well, you should be feeling positive because X, Y, Z, when everyone's situation might be different. But as a whole team, people can share small things that might have helped them through that day. It might have been, well, actually, I had a really, really tough week, but actually at the end of the week, I went for a walk to this beautiful place that I didn't know about before, and I'd really recommend that. Or somebody else might say, I found that my whole sleep cycle has been totally different. So I found maybe starting work late has really helped me, and just helping them open that conversation about small changes that might help. But I think equally, not brushing over those worries and those concerns, because they are very valid for people, and we don't know what people's situations all the time. So really taking the time to understand what's going on for them. Have they had additional stress? Have they had loss? Have they got people in their family that are shielding? Have they got childcare issues? Lots and lots of things. And there might be some things you can also give practical help with, but I think sharing ideas as a team is really helpful. Okay.
I think that's, just to jump in there, I think that's something we've had in our team. We've had people who have been in those situations where they've had, vulnerable family members, and they might have had to, shuffle their hours. We had one of our members of staff, she had a grandmother who was in hospital, and she just been able to talk to her, quite regularly on Slack, and actually say, how are you doing? What's going on? She said, I need to go to the hospital and see my grandma, and actually just being able to react live with her and change her hours. So she say, can I make up my hours here, there, and whatever. It just really helped, because it has to be a live situation, and if they feel that they can't come to you with those requests, I think it can create a lot of unnecessary pressure, when really it was absolutely fine with me.
It is, like you said, about encouraging people to talk and open up more, isn't it?
And I will also say that, one of the positive changes that has come out of this situation for a lot of teams is that some of those relationships have become more cohesive and more supportive, and people have learned different sides of colleagues and team members that they didn't know before. So we don't want to gloss over how challenging it's been, but there are some positive changes to come out of it for teams as well.
Yeah, well, that's brilliant. Got a couple more questions. Got one for you here, Haleh. Are there any tips that you can provide on how to introduce nutritional support without employees feeling that their employer is interfering too much?
Yes, I think that's a really, really good question. I think for me, again, if nutrition is pushed onto you or is forced, I think, there is that human thing that we all resist. I mean, if I tell everyone now, don't have carrots, everybody would want to have carrots. So I think, allowing people to the freedom to make a choice is always going to be a better option. We've seen examples of bigger organizations like Google, Amazon, places like that, where when, employers provide healthy food and provide, the support and gyms and obviously, kind of showers and things like that, people are more likely to take it up because they can see it as support rather than being told off. Or actually small little changes, actually even just putting calories. If food is provided, kind of at workplaces, just having the number of calories or just showing what 100 calories could mean, you can choose a donut, but you can actually choose a whole kind of chickpea curry for the same amount of calories. So it's not about calorie counting. It's about, for me, maybe, I'm moving a little bit away from the scientist that I am, but actually it's that having fun. I think food is fun. Food is such a good connector of people. Could we get people on board where, instead of, the love affair that in Britain with Great British Bake Off, can we have things that are a little bit lower in sugar, but you still have your cakes? Could we actually have replacements? Could we actually have, better breakfasts? Things that are doable and manageable. Honestly, the things that you can do with oats is unbelievable, and they don't have to cost the earth. So, oats are fantastic, amazing, so-called functional food that we celebrate as nutritionists. And you can add them to smoothies, you can add them to, to your brownies, you can add them to soup, so, and actually, we know that on average, people consume 3, portions of vegetables and fruits in UK. So even if you just told people to have 1 extra piece of fruit, I don't know, and make it into a competition within organization, I think that could really work. Let's see what people are eating. Let's see what people are doing, and actually make it into some kind of a fun and engaging, kind of activity. And then people want to come on board. And I think that's why Joe Wicks was so successful. He was, you know, dressing up. He was kind of like making it interesting. And also another thing that we found, I trained with my students 600 police officers at Greater Manchester Police. We had 90 police officers, and it was quite one of the biggest events I've done, but one of the most inspiring things I've done. And it was about mood and food. And I remember we mentioned to police officers, have more soup, have more smoothies. And one of the police officers got back to me saying, well, I'm wearing a stab-proof vest. There's no place where I can put soup in my pocket. What do you suggest? So actually, like, being really practical, even as a nutritionist, I was like, oh my God, they're telling me the truth. So we mentioned nuts and seeds as a replacement for you know, kind of obviously more high calorie food. So the emphasis should always be on nutritional density, where the quality of nutrition is superior, but, you know, and it gives you energy, but nutrition and enjoyment at the same time.
No, that's really good. That's really, I can see now that we'll be having some interesting topics involved in our team meetings going forward. I've got a few more questions. So I've got a question for John, and I've got a question for Stephen Kelly. So if I ask John first, so I've got a couple here for you, John. One is around indoor team sports. More than 6 people are now banned. So what alternatives can be organised to keep staff active, but also connected in a team? And also, kind of another one linked to that as well is a lot of our supporters had kind of activities planned that were focused around being in the workplace. Are there things? I know we talked a little bit about the localities walking last week. Are there practical things that they could encourage in their teams to do whilst they're at home? Where previously they've done them with other colleagues, but might not feel as confident now on their own.
So in response to the first one around the indoor activities and the rule of 6, there are plenty of apps out there that can pull this together for you, or, you know, there's online platforms where you can do your challenges. Trafford, in fact, it was GM Mental Health Foundation Trust, have just done a walk from John O'Groats to Land's End, where they were all clocking the steps each day, and then Mark, who was overseeing it, was collating that, and they could see this map as they were going down there, and he'd come online every day in their Zoom conferences and so on, and update them about where they were. So I think they did something like, I think they did it in a couple of days. They were that enthusiastic about it, and it was just something that really sort of captured their imagination and so on. So there are still things you can do, you know, and of course it's a rule of 6. So if you're below that, you're still okay. I know we were supposed to be having an away day, not away day, on Monday, and it's now not an away day, but we were going to meet up for walks. But again, you know, that's down to individual employers and how they want to go about that. You know, if team members, you know, still want to meet up, then, you know, that's their prerogative, I suppose. But, you know, permission disconnected, I think.
We can still hear you, John, but you've just gone from us visually. No? Well, we're just trying to get John back then. I'll just come on to Stephen Kelly and just ask you both. As employers, what support would you like to see being provided to you over the next 6 months to help you to keep your employees healthy and productive? I'll go to Steve first.
Okay, I was going to fade dead then and let Kelly go first. I think to be quite honest with you, Carl, there's nothing I'd ask for that's not already within our control. And I do think that this is probably a time when, and it comes back to what you were saying earlier about reassuring people that, yeah, it is uncertain, and there's nothing really wrong with uncertainty so long as you can accept that there's going to be uncertainty. And I think reassuring people that's the world that we're in and that's the norm that we're in is okay. So I don't think there's anything else, especially where we stand as a business, because the way that we earn our money in this business is through savings and mortgages, and so we've continued to earn. So we're in a fortunate position on that. And we've done things like we didn't want to furlough people early on. There were a few people said it would be helpful if we could, so we did, and continued to pay them 100% of the wages. And then once we got through it a bit further, we've repaid our furlough money to HMRC because the business has continued to do okay. So we paid that back. The sort of things that we can do within our gifts. So people are concerned. This came as a staff idea the other day that somebody said, well, we're hearing all this talk about flu and how that might be combined with COVID as well. So would the society do anything to help with flu? So thought that's a great idea. So we've said we'll provide vouchers for anybody to have the flu jabs. So I don't think there's really anything else that we could do. I think it's within our gift, but we have to be. I've been scribbling notes today because there's certainly like on the food side, on the health side, on the walking side, there's things that have absolutely slipped off. And when John was just talking about that walk, then last year or the year before, we supplied pedometers and we walked to the World Cup in Moscow as a team challenge. And I was just thinking, well, that's a great idea by John again. We could easily do that. And because we're not so close together, you forget a few things. So it's just great to have a few more ideas. And I think it is just about us upping the game and putting on our agendas the health of our people and the well-being of our people, and which includes diet as well. And try and give that at least equal importance with the other things in the business that continue to be important. I think one of the other things I'd say in terms of the health of the people and health of the business, we've also challenged people to say, well, you've been saying for ages that this is a poor process and that's a poor process. So why don't you, whilst you've got a bit of time away, why don't you try and redesign those for us? And once we get through this, whatever this is, in 6 months or whatever, we are going to be a stronger business at the end of all this, because some of the work that people have done is they've completely re-engineered the poor processes that we're working in. And they've partly done it because we've been forced into using the technology that was already at our fingertips, but we were neglecting to use because we were more comfortable working in our own processes. So I think there's plenty for us to do. We just have to be creative.
Yeah, I think you're right. And there's, as well as the challenges, there's been lots of good things that have come out of it, haven't there? So before I go to Kelly, if I just go back to John to finish off your answer, because you just got up to where you were the walking that you're going to do.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a webinar, would it, with one of us having poor internet connection? So it might as well have been me. Yeah, I mean, the second point was around, what are the things that we can do now, and how does that change things? And we're looking at things like 20-minute neighborhoods. So that means what are within your neighborhoods that you can either walk or cycle to, which are on blue spaces, canal tow paths or lakes and things like that you can walk to quite easily. And then sort of town centres and so on that you can, if you want to go and get a coffee, why not go and walk to the local town centre to get your coffee, or maybe work there from the morning, rules permitting. So it is slightly different, but there are still plenty of things that we can be doing to keep ourselves moving. So far, there's no restriction like there was before with the 1 hour of movement. So we're so far so good as well. So it's just a case of keeping that movement going. And then we talk about walking meetings as well. So you can still have your walking meeting. You can take your phone with you, and you can still be part of that meeting. So those kind of things can still happen. And when we do eventually get back to our offices, and I know some people in the chat are saying they're getting a mix of being in an office and being at home. Why not have walking meetings instead of staying inside this little box of a meeting room and getting out and about and exploring what's happening locally? Because I know I found stuff in my community that I didn't even know was here. So, and it's been really beneficial to me while we've been in this situation. So still plenty of things to do to keep ourselves active. Yeah,
definitely. And I like the 20-minute locality, because like you say, there is so much on our doorsteps that we're not aware of, and it's kind of about discovering those things as well, isn't it? Absolutely, so I'm going to go to Kelly then now. Kelly, just to continue the previous question about kind of what, if anything, you would like in terms of support over the next 6 months as an employer. Hope you're on mute, Kelly.
Like Steve, we didn't really take advantage of things like the furlough scheme and whatnot because we were fortunate enough to be able to keep everybody in work. But one thing that came in useful, I know the local government are looking at again, is the grant scheme. I think one thing that there's a scheme that they're looking into at the moment that's around like investing in things in order to sort of go more remote and sort of keep yourself running productively. Like one thing that we have is all of our employees are on desktops, so they've either taken the desktops home or they are using their home laptops. But for example, we're looking at, obviously we're going to be onboarding, when we onboard new staff, we'll want to be giving them laptops and maybe even give some of our current staff laptops for if and when we go back to our hybrid. So things, sort of grants based around investing in technology and platforms. We're currently investing in a remote phone system. Things like that I think will come in useful in helping employers just take that final push to really invest in the platforms that they're using. Aside from that, I think just signposting. There's a lot of resources out there for both employers and employees, whether that's around nutrition, mental health. And I think a lot of the time it's not that more resources need creating, it's just that there needs to be better signposting for it. So I think that's one thing that I would say is probably what I would add rather than necessarily adding to the mix.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that kind of technology, it's really come into its own these last 6 months, and I think most of us can agree that our technical skills have also improved quite significantly over this time as well. And things that you were once fearful of, are now just kind of the norm, aren't they? Using Zoom and Teams and things like that. I think we've come on leaps and bounds. So yeah, but I think that investment does need to continue, which is a really good point that you've made there, Kelly. We're almost up on our time now, so I'm just going to say a huge thank you to all of you on our panel. I think that all of the insights that you provided today have been so helpful, and I'm sure that the audience have gained a lot from this session. I know I certainly have. I found I could go on forever because it's a really interesting topic. So hopefully people will have had a good afternoon listening to this. And I think one of the things that I kind of wanted to say as well is that most of the people that are listening to this session, you are employers and you're responsible for managing people and you've got, really important roles in your organizations. But I think the one thing to remember as well is that, as well as trying to look after everybody else, you need to look after yourselves too. Because sometimes, thinking about everybody else can be a big distraction from what's actually going on with yourselves. So on that note, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody. Hope you've enjoyed it. We've got another session in a couple of weeks' time. You never know, we might have to wear face masks behind our screens. Who knows what's going to happen in the meantime. So for now, I just want to say have a good afternoon, everybody, and thanks again. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.